just wanna be a superhero. With fearless thoughts, emotions swirled, I wanna be the man that saves the world.
I have always had a deep fascination with Lex Luthor. Time and again, he proves to be Superman's greatest adversary, and he's just a guy, albeit an exceptional guy, and not a brainiac or a parasite or a Zod. Superman challenges Lex's superiority by virtue of his ability to save his city or his planet from almost any terrible threat, and no matter how ingenious Lex is, he can never compete with that, never make the world love him the way it does Superman. And in a lot of stories, it seems what really sickens Lex about Superman is that their motivations are so different. It doesn't compute to him that someone would devote his life to the betterment of mankind without trying to achieve personal glory. But he can never prove that Superman is motivated by anything but pure, unadulterated altruism. And of course, it's that altruism that makes the people love him so much. Lex threatens what Superman cares most about: the social progress and enlightenment of his adopted race and culture. Lex wants to prove that all people are inherently selfish creatures, and that only the strongest, smartest, and most ambitious deserve to be in charge. And conveniently, that means he's naturally better than everybody, while Superman believes it's possible for all human beings to live as equals, for the betterment of the entire race. So it's interesting that Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor have so much in common, and yet are nearly as dissimilar as Lex is to Superman. I'd argue that Lex is as great a foil for Batman. Both are rich, both frown on idealism, both use dramatic and often extreme methods to get results. Both are geniuses in their respective fields. Both are public figures and affect the world through mega corporations. And both are, to varying degrees, comfortable with using deception as a tool. The thing that sets them most apart is their beginnings, and again, their motivations. Bruce was born into riches, and he uses his wealth to stop what happened to his parents from happening to others. Lex was always out for himself, killed his own parents, and started his empire from scratch. That's actually one other thing Batman and Superman happen to have in common. Both were born with incredible advantages, and both choose to use them for something positive, at least assuming you're not Clark and you actually agree with Batman's methods. Lex may have been born with a superior intellect, or he may have developed that from scratch too, nature versus nurture, who can be sure, but he certainly cheated himself into his power at every stage, and his purpose, however he might validate it, was never a noble one. Superman-Batman Public Enemies really looks like it might be a great study of these three icons and their different worldviews, finally giving us President Lex on screen, and turning Superman and Batman into outlaws, where they have to clear their names, well, just Superman's, Batman's kind of just along for the ride, and prove Lex really is the psychopath they know he is, even though he just saved the country from a ravaging recession that nearly sent America into unprecedented chaos. And then it degenerates into a gazillion slugfests, and Lex throws all that ingenious subterfuge out the window in favor of madly flailing his arms around in a giant robot suit. I'm going to review this movie as its own piece rather than turning this into a comparison-contrast exercise, but at the risk of jumping on the Jeff Loeb hate train, the majority of my issues with the plotting in this movie were in the comics it was based on, the first 6 issues of Superman-Batman. It's too bad Stan Berkowitz adapted it so closely. This would have been a great opportunity to resolve some of those missed opportunities and stick with more of the social and political commentary set up in the first act that's summarily dismissed and never even remotely thought about once the obscure superhero and villain cameos start and the punches start flying. In contrast, Judd Winnick fixed a lot of problems with his own story when he adapted Batman Under the Red Hood a couple years later, and turned a story a lot of fans didn't care for into one of the most, if not the most, celebrated of these direct-to-video features. Like a lot of these DC animated movies that adapt a specific comic story, the animation attempts to borrow a similar art style, especially in its character models, to Ed McGuinness's source material. I think that works just fine here, though it took a bit of getting used to the first time I saw this film, as a lot of DC animated universe voice actors reprised their roles, including Kevin Conroy and Tim Daly. So it was a little strange seeing those bulkier versions of Superman and Batman with those voices. Since then, we've had other projects outside of the DCAU with those actors reprising their roles, and especially after Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, it's not so odd to me now. What is incredibly strange, though, is how this movie, even more so than Superman Doomsday, goes out of its way to earn a PG-13 rating, as if being more adult just because you threw in some gratuitous swearing somehow gives your movie more credibility or relevancy. I'll mention Batman Under the Hood once again. That movie needed a more adult rating because its subject matter and the violence necessary to properly explore that subject matter simply made it a story that wasn't suitable for children. It didn't try for that rating, it came naturally, and nothing stood out. How in the same movie that ends with a giant Superman-Batman mech robot is Lex Luthor also calling Amanda Waller the B-word? I should really be able to show my kid a superhero movie with huge, silly Superman-Batman robots. So who's this movie for then? Adults who grew up with superheroes and still appreciate really silly things like that, but also need some swearing thrown in there for good measure, just so they don't feel so childish for enjoying this? Sprinkling in some random adult content doesn't magically make a movie more sophisticated, and even forgetting that, why exclude kids under 13 if you don't have to? I'm pretty sure, especially with superheroes, kids are great for your bottom line. Certainly one could argue that the political themes make the film more for adults than kids, but there's no reason not to balance the ideas with the action, so there's something here for both, and make it a, here comes a radical suggestion, movie families can sit down and watch together? And what little thought-provoking commentary is here totally falls away as soon as the story catches up to its title, and Superman and Batman become public enemies. There was a lot of material in the comics with Lex Luthor as president before the Superman and Batman arc started, so the movie has to set up Lex's presidency within its own context. And I love how that's done. America is in economic turmoil, and it's nearly on the brink of collapse, so Lex is elected president because of his extreme ideas. Even though he has a notorious criminal record, he proves himself to the American people by turning the economy around and making the country powerful again. The film was released in 2009, just as we were facing a major recession in the real world. So the premise was a timely one, and that way the film doesn't have to spend a lot of time clunkily explaining no man's land, where in the comics, Lex's money helped bring Gotham back to civilization, and that had a lot to do with why he got elected. Lex cracks down on vigilanteism, saying that a lot of the problems with the country before he was elected stemmed from too many people working against the system instead of with it, and he convinces a small band of heroes to work for him, headed up by Captain Atom. In trying to convince Superman that Lex is maybe not the leader they deserve, but the one they need right now, Captain Atom reminds Superman that some of our presidents who are remembered as bad people made bold decisions in the White House that desperately needed to be made, saying Nixon turned our worst enemy into our best trading partner. This is maybe the most interesting idea in the film, that perhaps sometimes extreme borderline personalities are necessary for real progress. This is something Superman classically can't accept. His position is always that honesty and integrity wins the day, truth and justice. And yet, he's incredibly conflicted, because the system he believes so much in, that he insists on working within, trying never to cross over the line of the law as Batman is willing to do, is the system that elected his arch nemesis. He wants to see Lex as having cheated that system. But the kicker is, Lex was elected fair and square, and what's worse, the world really is better for it, so far. Superman has every reason not to trust Lex based on their past and the kind of man he's proven time and time again to be, but I also think he lets his pride get in the way a little. Lex has finally managed to save America, if not the world, in a way Superman never could. This isn't an idea the film explores at all, and I wish it did, but I think it's really interesting, that as much as Superman sees himself as a human being and a citizen and public servant of America, Lex did something he legally could never do. Became elected to public office, and worse, the highest office. Sorry, Superman, but this moment will never come. So there's a kryptonite meteor careening toward Earth. Now, I don't know why it's made of kryptonite or where it came from. Presumably Krypton. Maybe it just took that long for it to get there from when the planet exploded. We're not told. Ultimately, it's just a flimsy MacGuffin to create an imminent disaster, so Lex will have to ask Superman for help in stopping it. He wants to do that himself, launch some missiles at the meteor, but Amanda Waller, his chief advisor, advises him to use superheroes. She thinks he just wants to take all the credit for himself, and he reluctantly decides to meet with Superman in Gotham City for no other reason than when all this goes south and Superman gets shot with a kryptonite bullet, he's gonna need Batman to drag him through the sewers to the Batcave. To quote Plinkett from Red Letter Media, how convenient. Right away, I got the sense he had something else up his sleeve. That's pretty suspicious, right? Of all the hundreds of superheroes on Earth, several of which could, at least with their combined power, stop a freaking meteor from hitting the planet, he sets up a meeting with Superman? To stop a huge rock of the only thing that can kill him that's not gray with sharp bones sticking out? Well, I guess it worked in Superman Returns. Gee, I wonder why the one Green Lantern who used to be in this story is missing in this version. Lex starts to tell Superman about the meteor, and then Superman feels weak, and Lex reveals that one of his Secret Service agents is Metallo. Now first, let me mention that I really like that Lex has got a supervillain working for him. That helps illustrate how unnerving it is having Lex in the White House. He really does have the power now, legally, to do some pretty terrifying things, and with the power of the press behind him, he can spin anything in his favor, like later when he says he had Metallo on his staff because he wanted to give him a second chance, like the American public gave him. It instantly clues us in that, yep, this is still Lex Luthor we're dealing with, and he's not a changed man at all, but that doesn't mean the situation is any less complicated. Because again, the public elected him. And that means Superman, if he wants to work within the confines of the system he claims to cherish, can't really make a move on Lex unless he outright breaks the law. Lex is acting all smug and enjoying the idea of Superman having to work for him. And yes, he's got a guy powered by kryptonite. But this still all falls within jerk-face territory over supervillain plot. He tells Superman he wouldn't meet him without the proper backup. Metallo doesn't even make a move. And then Superman screws up and crosses that line. He throws the President of the United States to the ground. So what happens? Well, the Secret Service reacts, just like they would in real life. Superman continues to escalate the conflict, I guess assuming this whole thing is a trap or something, and throws a car at Metallo. All of this later on leads to Lex having Metallo killed and then framing Superman for his murder. Batman helps Superman as a fugitive, and the rest of the movie is a bunch of villains trying to collect on Lex's $1 billion bounty for Superman, who are mostly controlled by Gorilla Grodd, just as a device to get a bunch of them attacking in the same place at once, because that's cool looking. Then Lex's superheroes attacking them, then they're winning over Power Girl and exposing Major Force as Metallo's real murderer, a two-dimensional loose cannon just looking for any reason to kill someone, and finally Lex stupidly revealing his real plan to just let the meteor hit the Earth so he can lead a new world order with whoever's left. Throwing away his whole presidency to fight Superman in a robot suit because he's totally deranged after shooting up on a kryptonite cocktail for no good reason. And Batman stopping the meteor with a giant rocket built by the Japanese toy man that conveniently includes both their likenesses, even though he built it when he was 7 and had no idea he would end up loaning it out to specifically those two heroes. Hero is really the hero here. You notice what I've left out of the synopsis of the whole rest of that plot? Any kind of discussion or consequences of what Superman did at that meeting with Lex, because they're not there. Everything that follows after that is entirely Superman's fault. All he had to do was fly off as soon as he started feeling the effects of the kryptonite, or I don't know, and let Lex make some kind of adversarial move before he instigated an incident. Lex may have hoped he would do something like that, may have planned to set Superman up so he could blame him for murder, but Superman had to meet him halfway. Lex lies to the public and blames the meteor for Superman's behavior, saying as it comes closer to Earth, it's affecting Superman's mind. Batman asks Superman if that's possible, and he says it's never affected him that way before. That's the closest Batman gets to questioning Superman's choice there. Like, oh, well, if it wasn't mind control, then of course it's okay that you overreacted. As I always say, I don't want to rewrite the film, but what I'm about to suggest is a possible character arc within the framework of the story that we have here. As it is, neither he or Batman gets one. This would have been a great opportunity to explore Superman and Batman's ideals, maybe show Superman beginning to appreciate Batman's more realistic approach to crime fighting after he himself crosses a line, and then reeling it back in when he realizes his mistake and decides he was right all along, that he should have continued to trust his code of ethics and let Lex make a mistake on his own time, which he eventually does anyway on account of his own carelessness due to kryptonite poisoning. Instead, it's fight, 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 superheroes finding out Superman was right about Lex all along, and Superman being totally justified at the end. Wouldn't it have been a bit more compelling if he had to admit that even though Lex was really planning something horrendous, he dealt with it the wrong way, and brought a lot of hardship on himself and Batman he could have avoided with a cool head? Instead, he and Lex fight while Batman stops the big rock, and he's ultimately only in this movie because it needs somebody who knows how to fly things to do that. I mean, it could have been Wonder Woman, or Hal Jordan, or Steve Trevor, or Geordie LaForge, or Iceman, or Snoopy, or Thanos, or Hello Kitty, and then that meeting would just have to coincidentally be set wherever that person happens to live. And when Superman finally takes Lex out, he triumphantly says, "Consider yourself impeached." I recognize that's just a cute one-liner, but Superman's natural character arc would be to remind himself that even when the law allows for things to happen he doesn't like, he's not above it. Or maybe to decide that sometimes he is, like Batman, however the movie wanted to approach it. Instead, by saying that, he sounds as if he thinks his might always makes right, because he's Superman. And I don't see how you could be any more comfortable with that than with Lex as president. If you think I'm giving this far too much thought, I won't disagree with you. This movie isn't really about political intrigue. It's a big, loud, fun superhero movie, and sure, the fights are well animated and choreographed, and they're a ton of fun to watch, especially the Captain Marvel and Hawkman fight. And sure, it's fun to see Superman and Batman disguised as those guys. I can't say I've ever seen that before. And sure, it was fun seeing the Superman-Batman yin-yang realized as a Batwing. But then why open with such an intriguing premise? Get my noodle going with this political commentary about bad people with power and whether the good they might bring is worth the consequences, a classic ends justifies the means quandary, and then forget all about that for the rest of the movie. I think the over-the-top fun could have been blended with all that. Those ideas could still permeate a movie filled with off-the-wall action. Once I realized the setup would probably never pay off, it was a little easier to get on board with the standard stop the bad guys big plan plot, but it was certainly disappointing. So finally, let's dissect the big bad guy plot, since at the end of the day, that's pretty much what we're left with. I find myself having to guess at what Lex is trying to do at each stage of his plan. The movie is very unclear. As I said already, I can't tell if he went into that meeting with Superman intending to frame him for murder, or if Superman just gave him that opening and then he ran with it. If he didn't, I'm not sure why he was there in the first place. Was he really planning on using Superman as a backup plan in case his rockets didn't work, or was that a lie? If that was the case, I wonder if he brought Metallo with him to mask the fact that his veins are flowing with kryptonite. After all, if Metallo wasn't there, Superman might still have been weakened the closer he got to Lex, because we'll discover later that he too has a bunch of kryptonite in his system. But then I'm not sure if his endgame was always to let those rockets hit the Earth, or if that was also an afterthought. He certainly couldn't have known about it before his presidency. Did he know those rockets wouldn't work and he was just biding his time, or did he hope they'd work, but then now even more insane from kryptonite injections? He's crazy enough to think the asteroid hitting the Earth is suddenly a great idea? Obviously, if he was lucid and not totally irrational, I might point out that if that was always his plan, there are better and less lame ways to destroy most of the Earth so you can command what's left than hoping a big rock that's still pretty far away hits the planet before superheroes can stop it, or anybody catches on to the fact that you want that to happen. But I can't suggest that because the kryptonite injections conveniently negate any sort of logic whatsoever. That's why they're there. Of course, there's no good reason whatsoever he should be taking those injections except in anticipation of some giant fight with Superman, which should never have to happen if he just keeps playing his cards close to his vest like he has been. Being president is working! All he has to do is keep giving people reasons to trust him, and then slip his devious plans in under everybody's noses. If he wasn't turning himself into a crypto-freak, he'd never have even thought to blow up the world and start over. He's getting closer and closer to ruling the one with the 7 billion people on it just the way it is. And the only reason he's careless enough to frame Superman for murder, Superman who, prior to the meeting Lex set up, was no more threat to his presidency than he has been at any other time, is because the movie needs him to take drugs or some other plot device, so he'll throw on a big robot suit and get impeached by Superman at the end. Browncoat Eric reminded me that as the President Lex stories were running in the comics before Superman Batman, the idea was that Superman would get Lex out of office not as Superman in a big stupid fight, but with his brains, with the power of the press as Clark Kent, which would have been great. The opening of this film is only so intelligent because it represents the more thoughtful ideas those comics were exploring before Jeff Loeb abruptly ended Lex's presidency in the most obtuse, typical, and unremarkable way imaginable. Lex being exposed for some enormous conspiracy might have led to his putting on a robot suit in a last-ditch effort to defeat Superman, I guess, but I don't like that he's so careless he just beats himself over a pointless drug addiction. If the original material's got big problems, don't stick to the source material. Make it better. This is one of those rare examples where the script is greatly hindered by not taking more liberties. Still, it's a great looking movie, and regardless of the uneven tone, it's certainly entertaining, crazy superhero fare. I wish it was intended for children. The kids would love it. I'm going to give Superman Batman Public Enemies a 2 out of 4. And join me next time for a Rewind United review of A Beautiful Mind requested by my mother. Stay tuned.